What's good, big timers? It's RDL here, and today I'm gonna be talking about the original and the remake of When the Stranger Calls. So starting off, we're gonna be talking about the original from 1979. In the original, we get introduced to a high school student named Jill Johnson who is babysitting for two kids that are supposedly sleeping upstairs in their bedroom. An hour later, while she was doing her homework, Jill gets a phone call, and when she answers, the person immediately hangs up.
The phone will ring, and there'll be no one there.
The phone rings again, and when Jill answers, she hears this.
Have you checked the children?
What?
She continued to do her homework. The phone rang for the third time, and she was asked the same question again.
Have you checked the children?
Dr. Mandrakis?
When Jill hung up the phone, she heard the noise. She went into the kitchen, and it turned out that the noise came from an ice machine. Jill grabbed herself a popsicle and slowly walked back to the living room. She hears the phone ring for the fourth time, and when she answers, she gets asked the same question.
Have you checked the children?
Jill assumes that it's a prank call from someone that she knows, and the person hung up again. Jill drinks a glass of wine, and the phone rang for the fifth time. Jill picked up the phone, and there was no answer, so she hung up.
The phone will ring, and there'll be no one there.
Jill called the restaurant where the kids' parents are supposed to be at, and she found out that the parents left the restaurant almost an hour ago. She hung up the phone and decided to call the police. She tells the police that she's been getting strange phone calls every 15 minutes. They told her that it was nothing to worry about because they've been getting reports about strange phone calls every night. A little bit later, the phone rang again, and when Jill picked up the phone, she gets asked this question.
Why haven't you checked the children?
Jill gets startled and immediately hung up the phone. She closed the window and locked the door, even though she should have done that as soon as the parents were gone. Jill was about to go upstairs to check on the children, and she heard the phone ring again. Jill let the phone ring, and she arms herself with an umbrella. She called the police again, and she told them that the person called again. The police told her that they can alert the phone company so that if the person called again, they can trace the phone call back to that person. She gives the police the phone number and the address to the house. The police told her that she has to keep the person on the phone for at least 1 minute so they can trace the call. After talking to the police, Jill stayed on high alert with a weapon in her hand. The phone finally rings, and Jill answers the phone and tries to have a conversation with the person. Jill tells the person that the kids' parents are going to be home soon. The person told Jill that he knows. Jill asks if the person can see her, and the person says yes. She asks the person what they wanted, and here's what they said.
Your blood all over me.
The person hung up, and Jill puts the phone down. A couple of seconds after, the phone rang again, and Jill immediately picked up the phone to tell the person to leave her alone, and it turns out that the police was calling her to tell her this.
We've traced the call. It's coming from inside the house. A squad car's on the way over there right now. Just get out of that house.
Just as Jill was opening the door to leave, she sees a light coming from the hallway and saw somebody's shadow. Jill managed to escape from the house, and when the police arrived, they found a man who was upstairs covered in the blood of the kids that Jill was babysitting. He was using a phone that the parents never disconnected. The man is also described as an English merchant seaman who entered the country less than a week ago. We also find out that the kids were dead for several hours before Jill even arrived. We fast forward 7 years later, a former police lieutenant turned private investigator named Clifford gets hired by Dr. Mandrakis, who is the father of the kids that were murdered 7 years ago. He tells Clifford that a man named Curt Duncan had broken out of a facility and wants him to find him. He's also the same man that killed his kids 7 years ago. Clifford went to the facility that Curt broke out of to get some clues. We finally get introduced to Curt Duncan, who is at a bar. He tries to talk to the middle-aged woman named Tracy, but she's uninterested, and Curt is confronted by a random man who tells him to leave her alone. Curt spits in the man's face and gets beat up and dragged out of the bar as a result. Curt starts stalking Tracy and follows her to the apartment. Curt wanted to apologize to Tracy, but Tracy apologized instead because she didn't mean for him to get beat up and thrown out of the bar. In the next morning, Clifford is still searching for clues about Curt and goes to Tracy's apartment to talk to her about him. He tells Tracy that Curt had killed 2 infant children with his own bare hands. Tracy told Clifford that Curt was in her house the night before and told her that he had no place to go. Clifford suspects that Curt might return and asks Tracy if she agreed to work with him. She agrees to work with him, and Curt is outside stalking Tracy's apartment. Clifford talks to his friend named Charlie Garber, who works as a police lieutenant. He told Garber that he planned on killing Curt for the murder of those 2 kids. Garber doesn't agree with killing Curt, but he reluctantly agreed to help Clifford. Later on at night, Tracy is at a bar waiting for Curt to show up, but after a while she leaves the bar because Curt didn't show up. When Tracy returns home, she gets caught by surprise by Curt, who had broken into her house and told her that he wants her to be his friend. Tracy screams and Curt escapes her house before Clifford showed up. Curt gets flashbacks about the night he killed those 2 kids. Clifford caught Curt sleeping in a homeless shelter and he tried to kill him by throwing a lock needle at him, but he missed and Curt ended up escaping. And the next morning we get reintroduced to Jill Johnson, who is now a housewife and a mother of 2 kids. At nighttime, Jill and her husband, Stephen Lockhart, go out to dinner and hire a babysitter to watch the kids. At dinner, Jill received a phone call and she immediately recognized that the caller was Curt Duncan himself.
Have you checked the children?
She has an emotional breakdown and she tells her husband that Curt Duncan is back. He called the house to check on the babysitter and told her to check on the children. Jill and Stephen immediately rushed back to the house with the police, and Jill checked on the children and saw that they were perfectly fine. Later on at night, while Jill was getting a glass of milk, the power shut down. She went back to her kids' bedroom and checked their closet and nothing was there. Meanwhile, Clifford tries to call Jill's house, but her phone line was disconnected. Jill checks her house phone and she discovers that the line is not working. Jill hears something, and when she tries to wake up her husband, she discovers that Curt was in her bed right next to her and he tries to kill her by strangling her to death, but before he could, Clifford showed up just in time and shot Curt dead several times. Clifford also discovered that Stephen was in the closet, completely knocked out by Curt. Clifford also comforted Jill, who was still shook from nearly getting killed by Curt. And that's the end of this movie, and now I'm gonna be talking about the remake from 2006. So starting out in this remake, the police showed up and they found 3 children and their babysitter named Stacy brutally murdered without a weapon upstairs in the bedroom. Meanwhile, in Fernhill, Colorado, which is about 125 miles from the murder scene, we get introduced to a 16-year-old teenage girl named Jill Johnson. We see her practicing for the high school track and field team. Her ex-boyfriend named Bobby tries to apologize for cheating on Jill, but she wasn't trying to hear what he had to say. She goes to art class and talks to her friend named Scarlett. Jill tells her that she's been grounded for a month for overusing the minutes that she had on her flip phone, and she lost her driving privileges. She has to pay it off by babysitting after school for a wealthy family who lives far away in the woods. Jill gets dropped off at the house and she meets Mr. Mandrakins, who is a rich doctor, and Mrs. Mandrakins, who is his wife. The kids are sick from the flu and they are currently getting some rest. Mrs. Mandrakins shows Jill around the house. They have a pet cat named Chester, and Mrs. Mandrakins showed Jill a list of emergency contacts in case if she needed anything. She tells Jill that they have a maid named Rosa who lives in the house with them. They also have a guest house where their oldest son stays at for most of the weekends, and he's currently in college. The Mandrakis couple leave to go out for dinner. At nighttime, Jill sees Rosa feeding the fish and she gets a phone call, and when she answers,
The phone will ring, and there'll be no one there.
a little bit later, Jill tries to check on Rosa, but she's nowhere to be found and assumes that she left. A little bit later, while doing her homework, Jill gets a prank call. She gets paranoid when she hears some noise and arms herself with a fire poker. She checks around the house and she discovered that the noise came from an ice machine. She ate a popsicle and she put the fire poker back where it belonged. Jill got another phone call and it was once again a prank call, but this time it was from Jill's other friend named Tiffany. She snuck inside the house through a garage door that was open. Jill closed the garage door. We find out that Jill is mad at Tiffany for kissing Bobby, who was her boyfriend at the time. Tiffany tried to use an excuse by saying that she was drunk, and Jill mentioned that Tiffany had a crush on Bobby since their freshman year. She also tells Tiffany that she has to leave because she's currently babysitting. As Tiffany was leaving, she discovered that the gate was blocked by a tree branch. She got out of the car so she could try to remove it. Jill hears someone banging on the door, and when she opened it, no one was there. The phone rings again, and when she answers, it turned out to be her ex-boyfriend Bobby. Jill asks him if he's been calling the house. Bobby told Jill that his friend Cody was the one who prank called her earlier and made him stop. While they were talking, their phone signal became lost. There was a second house phone, and when it rang, it said that her friend Tiffany was calling. When Jill answers the phone, she thinks that Tiffany is doing another prank call, but she hears a strange man's voice who tells Jill that it's not Tiffany. The strange man hung up and Jill called her friend Scarlett, who was at a bonfire party. She tried to talk to her, but the phone signal wasn't strong enough. Jill tries to call the Mandrakis couple at the restaurant, but it turns out that they left less than an hour ago. She calls the police and tells them that she's been getting strange phone calls every 15 minutes from a man, and that is starting to scare her. What kind of doesn't make sense is that the man actually don't call her twice, and the other 2 phone calls were a prank. But anyways, while she was on the phone with the police, Jill noticed that Rosa's car was still there. After talking with the police, Jill tried to call out for Rosa, but she got no answer. The phone rang once again, and when Jill answered, she was asked this question.
Have you checked the children?
Jill immediately hung up and checked on the children. The children were asleep and the phone rang again. Jill answered the phone and she was asked this question.
How were the children?
She immediately realized that she's being watched and she closed the curtains. Jill called the police again and told them that the man was somewhere watching her. The police told her that they can alert the phone company so that if he called again, they could trace the number. They also told her that she has to keep the man on the phone for at least 1 minute. The police also told her that it's gonna take 20 minutes to send a car over to the house. After getting off the phone with the police, Jill waits for the phone to ring again. After a few minutes, the phone rang again and Jill kept track of how many seconds the phone conversation lasted with a strange man. She looked out the window and noticed that a light was on at the guest house and she saw somebody's shadow. Jill goes to the guest house to investigate. When she went to the guest house, she discovered that nobody was there at all. Just when she was about to leave the guest house, the phone rings, and when she answers, there was no one there.
The phone will ring, and there'll be no one there.
Jill runs back to the main house and the phone rings and she hears the man breathing through the phone, being completely silent. When Jill asked him what he wanted, he said this.
You have blood all over me.
Jill hung up and heard the shower running in the bathroom. She entered the bathroom and saw that nobody was there, and she turned the shower off. The phone rings again and Jill immediately answers the phone to tell the person to leave her alone, but it turns out that the police were calling her to tell her this.
We traced the call. It's coming from inside the house. Do you hear me? It's coming from inside the house.
As soon as she heard this, all of the power in the house had cut off. Jill hears someone's phone ringing, and when she turned around, she found Tiffany's dead body. Jill went into the children's bedroom to wake them up, but she discovered that they weren't in their beds. She found them hiding in the playroom in their toy box. Jill sees the strange man on the roof and she locks herself and the kids in the playroom. Jill and the kids went out through the window and she hid the kids somewhere in the bushes. Jill hid in the water underneath the floor. While hiding in the water, she found Rosa's dead body. The strange man spots the kids and the kids immediately start running to try and escape through the front door. Unfortunately, they are not tall enough to reach the top lock. The strange man finds Jill hiding in the water and tries to grab her. Jill manages to tilt the floor to the side and makes the strange man fall into the water with her. Jill gets out of the water and the strange man grabs her by her hair just when she shuts the door on him. Jill rips her hair out and she unlocks the front door. Jill looks for the kids and she finds them hiding in the fireplace. The kids were able to escape, but Jill gets caught by the strange man and he shuts the door on her. While Jill was fighting him off and nearly got strangled to death, she threw a bottle of tequila at the fireplace, and when she turned it on, the fire stunned him. Jill took a fire poker and stabbed his hand into the floor. Jill finally escapes the house and she runs into the police. The strange man has been arrested and he's being transported to a mental hospital. Jill and the strange man locked eyes with each other as the police car drove away. A little bit later, while at the hospital, Jill walks around the hospital looking for a nurse and she hears a phone ring in her room. When she closed the door, the strange man appeared behind her and grabbed her. It turned out to be a nightmare that Jill was having, and she now suffers from PTSD from her encounter with the strange man. And that's the end of this remake. And now that I've done a recap on both the original and the remake, I'm gonna give y'all my final thoughts on both of them. Starting with the original, I think the best parts of this movie were the opening and the ending because those were the only scary parts. The rest of the movie felt like a normal neo-noir instead of a horror movie. The movie focused more on the character Clifford more than it focused on Jill Johnson, who was supposedly the main character. This movie isn't the extended remake of a short film that the director made 2 years earlier called The Sitter. The house in the opening scene and the house in the ending scene were both torn down after this movie was made for unknown reasons. This movie was originally supposed to be a short film, but after seeing the success of Halloween, they decided to make it into a full movie. Tony Beckley, the actor who played Curt Duncan in this movie, was actually terminally ill, and it explains why you hear him coughing in some parts of the movie. He died a year after this movie was released at the age of 50. The movie was originally rated PG, but it was rated R because it was considered too scary for kids. The timeline of this movie was originally supposed to take place in 1971, and the 7-year time skip would fast forward the movie into 1978. The part where Jill found out that the call was coming from inside the house was inspired by another horror movie called Black Christmas, which came out 5 years before. It's never been fully clear how old Jill was in the movie, but in the opening she was supposedly a senior in high school, which means that she was either 17 or 18 years old, and in the 7-year time skip she will be either 24 or 25 years old. It's crazy how Jill Johnson was a side character in her own movie, even though she's on the main cover of this movie. I don't know if that was some type of false advertising or what, but anyways, the movie was released by Columbia Pictures on September 28th in 1979. The movie was made on a $1.5 million budget, and it was very successful at the box office, making $25 million. The movie had mixed reviews, and most of the good reviews were about the opening and the performances, and the bad reviews were about the lack of horror and how this movie was written. The movie was also released on VHS in 1981 and 1986. 17 years after this movie was released, the opening of this movie would become the inspiration for the movie Scream. In 2001, the movie was released released on DVD, and those are my final thoughts on the original, and here are my final thoughts on the remake. I'm probably gonna get some hate for this, but I think the remake is way better than the original when it comes to writing, because in the original we only got to see Jill Johnson, who was supposedly the main character, mostly in the opening scene and in the ending of the movie. She felt more like a side character because the original focused more on Clifford. In the remake, it focused more on Jill Johnson like it was supposed to, and she felt more like a main character than the original one did. I also found the main villain in this movie more terrifying than the one in the original, because you hardly got to see him until the final act, and we never knew who he truly was, and it makes him even more mysterious. The main villain was played by two different people. Lance Henriksen did the speaking part, and Tommy Flanagan did the physical part. The role of Jill Johnson was originally offered to Evan Rachel Wood, but she turned it down. Camilla Belle almost turned down the role of Jill Johnson because she wasn't a fan of horror movies, but she changed her mind when they told her that it was going to be a psychological thriller. She also had to turn down a role in another horror remake called Black Christmas so she could commit to this movie instead. To prepare for her role, Camilla had to do weight training a few times a week for 2 months and had to learn how to run like a track star. She also had to watch movies such as Wait Until Dark, Rosemary's Baby, and The Shining. During filming, Camilla did most of her stunts, and she suffered a couple of minor injuries on set. The scene where Jill and the strange man were fighting on the stairs actually took a week to film. The character Tiffany was originally supposed to have her cell phone shoved into her mouth when Jill finds her dead body, but the idea was scrapped because the cause of her death felt too obvious. I feel like that detail would have been better because her cause of death was kinda confusing because we didn't see any bruises on her neck or anything on her body, so it kind of feels like a missed opportunity. It was also the acting debut of Tessa Thompson, who played Scarlett, and Kate Cassidy, who played Tiffany. The movie was made on a $15 million budget, and it was released on February 3rd in 2006. It received a lot of negative reviews because most of the critics thought that it was extremely inferior to the original. Despite the negative reviews, it did pretty well at the box office, and it made $67.1 million. The movie was released on DVD on May 16th in 2006. There was originally supposed to be a sequel to this movie titled When a Stranger Returns, where Hayden Panettiere was going to play as a babysitter, but it got canceled for unknown reasons. Just recently, a couple of years ago, there was talks of making a sequel to this movie where Jill Johnson was older and had a family of her own, and the main villain would break out of the asylum, but there hasn't been anything else about it so far. And those are my final thoughts on the remake. If you made it this far into the video, thank you guys for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button. And if you want more videos like this, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notifications. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.
Bust down, new flash, touchdown in a brand new jag. Every day there's a brand new chain, gotta stay